Hi, I've laid out 3 Harvard kits, the Airfix in the middle, Hella and Academy, and I'm just going to run through a little bit of a discussion on these 3 kits. This is the Academy kit, close to complete. I still need to do canopy framing. We do have a couple of other 1/72 Harvards. This one, which is a very, very simple one and one of the earliest ones, you can't buy it anymore. It's got the decal engraved into the wing surface. That's how to know you have one of these. The wing is in a complete one piece. I think this was released under a few names, Testers, possibly Hawk, I'm not sure exactly. It's not a great model, but it can be made into a reasonably acceptable looking display piece, but I'm not really going to discuss those. Another one is the Hobby Boss. This is the Hobby Boss kit, which is sort of okay. One of the biggest problems with that is that they've somehow managed to get the upper surface rather flat and the lower surface is curved, so they've sort of reversed the curvature on the two sides. This is actually your upper aerofoil and this should be your lower surface. It can make a nice enough model, but I'm not going to discuss that one now. So we've got Airfix, Hella, Academy. I've laid them out so that the parts more or less line up, although I should put those 2 little pieces over here somewhere. Okay, so the Airfix being the simple one in the middle, raised panel lines, raised rivet lines, raised panel lines, engraved panel lines. This is 1962 molding. This is, I'm not sure exactly, old, but not as old. And this would be, what would that be, late 80s or 90s. The interior of the Airfix Harvard really just had a couple of pins to insert the seats. Very simple seats, sort of the generic Airfix seats, which really are not accurate and have no purpose other than to hold the pilots. I've left the pilots out of this view as they're not really part of the airframe as such. The Hella kit improved quite substantially on that. Not necessarily that much with exterior detail. In fact, I wouldn't rate the exterior of the Hella kit as much better. Maybe slightly here and there, looking a little bit at rudder detail, that looks better. Rudder shape looks better. The Airfix rudder shape is not the greatest. Look, there are inaccuracies in the Airfix kit. This one is an obvious choice over the old Airfix kit, but they've got an exhaust ring, the ignition. I think that's meant to represent the ignition harness, and not an accurate engine, but an acceptable engine, 2-piece cowling. Undercarriage parts more or less the same. In fact, I'd say the Airfix ones are a bit better than those. Probably a bit better of a tail wheel with the mounting assembly, the part that actually pivots when you put weight on the aircraft as it lands. We now have 2 intakes, whereas the Airfix molded the lower intake onto the fuselage. Better seats, still not accurate, but better. Canopy is much of a muchness, maybe a slight improvement over Airfix. much of a muchness for the propeller. And now a couple of cockpit parts, the radio shelf, the bulkhead behind the cockpit, instrument panels, the roll cage, part of the frame, and the control columns. So until Academy released their Harvard, this was certainly the choice Harvard model to do. And then we got the Academy release, which of course is really, really awesome. But compared to what Airfix is doing with its latest models, I think we can improve greatly when Airfix actually decides to do a new Harvard. The surface detail, recessed panel lines and all can hardly be faulted. Really, really good quality. They could have separated ailerons and rudder. That would have been a nice feature, and elevators. And they could have separated flaps if they wanted to, even on a 1/72nd scale. That would be a nice idea. When we look at the Academy's parts, we notice that they definitely used the Hella for a sort of prototype. So we've got those two parts which match up almost perfectly. We've got those two which match up almost perfectly. We've got the two engines which are almost identical. The seats are a little bit different. We've got sidewalls on the cockpit, which was quite a improvement in what you could now achieve for the Harvard cockpit. That certainly raised it to the next level. Compared to the Airfix undercarriage doors, these are too narrow. So for some reason they got that wrong, which would also not match the holes for them. You can just see that that's too thin to actually fit into there. They also, interestingly, provided the aileron push mechanisms, which Hella had originally provided. Nice little extra detail. The canopies are now in 3 parts, and that does really look good. One could improve upon that by having them in 5 parts, or at least a 5-part canopy and then a single piece canopy option would be good. We've got landing lights, which Airfix never had. The Hella kit had landing lights, although they are a little bit deeply recessed. They're too large. Nice pieces, and it'll make a nice display piece, but these are more accurate, though possibly also too deep. In fact, I wonder if they are exactly the same depth. I wonder if they've just copied that. No, the Academy is slightly better, but still a bit too deep. So I still like all of the kits. Obviously, when you're building the Academy kit, you're going to be doing a far better quality build than the other two. If you're building the Airfix kit with its one-piece cowling engine molding, you just accept it for what it is. It has the long exhaust as used by Canada and select cold countries. This one has the short exhaust attached to the ring, so does this one. I didn't mention there's a spinner and a couple of the smaller details there, which one doesn't include on many builds. To move forward from this, I mean, we are a good 30 years into the future from when this was released, and in the event that Airfix would release a new Harvard, which I think would be a very, very good move on their part, I would suggest that the baggage door over here be removed as an independent piece, as well as then possibly offering the entire baggage compartment as an interior fuselage piece, which can be done. This really needs to be improved. They need to get a much, much better R1340 engine, and not on a single hard backing plate like it's done here. They really need to make a high quality engine. The exhaust ring, I'd say, is okay. They could include the baffle plate and even possibly a proper firewall for the kit. That I'm okay with. That's a single piece cowling is no problem. The prop really only needs its counterweights. So whether that gets molded as a one piece or provided separate like the 1/48th monogram, although they're small parts, it doesn't matter. To have an accurate model, you do need those counterweights. The engine would also need the CSU, which is just a little box on the front there. We need good seats. These seats are not accurate at all. We need something. We need something in the line of this. A good bucket seat on its frame mounting. The frame could be separate. The frame was slightly represented by that part there on the Hella. Intakes are okay. One of the intakes has a number of little pipes on them. The lower one, that one, they could actually mold that. I don't have a problem with the instruments. That's good enough. They could provide the internal gun, as used on some variants, wartime. They could provide the dual covers up here, one without the use of the gun and one with a gun blister. That would be a nice addition. Radio shelf could get a radio. Now, although radio equipment did change depending on the era that you were in, but still, I think a bit of radio equipment to mount on here would be great. And I'd like to see the cockpit framing detail without the solid backing. I don't think that's a requirement for their molding purposes. I know it makes it nice and easy and robust, but it'll be such an improvement to actually just get good quality, because that as well, that isn't what the lower section of the cockpit looks like at all. So we need vast improvement there. Engine and cockpit detail. As I've said, elevators would be nice to have separate. And then another big improvement would be to provide the internal, if not actually a removable side panel, which actually would be a nice feature as well, whether that's provided removable or not, but the longerons and strengthening details on the inside of those side panels, so that even when you have the cockpit piece going on top of that without this solid back plate, you can see the ribbing detail inside there. Because the Harvard was used by so many air forces in so many countries, and even in civilian use, there are probably more color schemes for the Harvard than exist for any other aircraft, which means that you could provide an awesome collection of decals. You could provide three full sets, 3 full sheets. I don't think decal production is a very costly thing for the model companies. They could make one of the features, one of the draw cards of a new Harvard, providing for like 10 color schemes and decal options. That also needs improvement. The undercarriage bay really shouldn't be a piece that looks like that, and there's way more detail to be added inside there with pipes and so on. I think that's about all that I can think to say about this. Hope you enjoyed that one.